Welcome to a Fantasy Fan Sportscast with Easy and Lou Landers. Now enjoy the show, but don't forget our safe word.
And welcome. And this week, our safe word is Marvin Jones. I just, because that's a question I'll have later. Welcome to Easy on a Sunday morning with my co-host, Lou Landers from Landers Talks. I now have to stop and think of that every time because I want to do Landers Talks and Stalks or a few different things. But Lou, how are you doing today? Are you ready for some football?
I am born ready for some football, Easy. I am doing great, especially after last night's Yankees win versus the Red Sox. I'm feeling a hell of a lot better. I know we're doing a football show, but I would be remiss if I did not get to talk a little bit about my Yanks pulling off a big win in Fenway. And really, the Yankees have dominated that series, in my opinion, outside of the first 5 innings by Chris Sale.
Right. Well, now I hate to say it because the other day you had all the shirts and everything on the background of another room you were sitting in. So I'm assuming you haven't taken the shirts down. You still have Yankees on the back wall.
They will be up there until the moment I move next Monday, October 15th, assuming that they continue to play.
Right. Well, we'll see if we have time at the end. Maybe I'll ask a couple pickup questions for our playoff league because I lost all my Cubs.
I'm not going to help you there because the slim pickings to begin with, man.
I know I'm in big trouble.
I can't even afford to help you.
I am in big trouble, but that's okay. You know what? If anything, it was fun drafting. I know we don't want to get into too much baseball, even though, right now,
drafting is fun. Honestly, it doesn't even matter what you're drafting for. Like, I don't play fantasy basketball anymore. But I would draft. I wouldn't want to actually look at it the rest of the year, but I would draft just for the sake of drafting.
But I don't like the best ball leagues. I mean, I'd like it, but I don't.
I've never played in one.
I don't. I mean, I try not to, but you end up getting in a few. Chris does a bunch. Now he does those ones that DFS 10s or whatever they're called. He gets in like 50 of them, and those kind of things. So to me, I don't know. I'm even this year is probably the most leagues I've ever been in. I think it's 9. And it just, when you only were in a couple, you could root for the same people. Now, I'm still pretty good about, I commit to players. I draft them everywhere. I'm not one of those diversifiers, but
yeah. You know what though, Easy? I actually cheer more for my DFS lineups than anything else.
Whatever you already know who I cheer on those. I mean, I'm just cheering for Bengals. So,
but for me, I mean, the DFS lineups are typically going to pay out more if you hit on them than any of your season-long leagues.
Right.
Off, so I care about that. But also in DFS, they're matching up against a million people. It doesn't really matter what they do. It matters what you do. Whereas in fantasy, season-long fantasy, it really comes down to what your opponent does, in my opinion, not really what you do. Because you're going to set your best lineup no matter what. You can put up 190 points, but if they put up 200, it doesn't really matter. So
don't ruin it for me, Lou. Don't ruin it for me.
So to me, I check my lineups, at the end of the second round of games in season long, and that's really it. But with DFS, I'm on the page constantly refreshing.
Well, I have a DFS question here too a little bit later, but let me just start with, coming at this from the fans' point of view. First of all, go to Lenny Melnick, FantasySports.com. Join us in the chat room. I got to remember to say that every time. Now, I know a lot of our viewers are people from there anyway, but you know what? Get out there and type in your questions, ask us. But I'm just always curious from a fan's point of view because it always messes me up. What's the biggest move you've made so far this morning?
This morning? So I have a league where I own Randall Cobb. I own Devontae Adams. And I think Devontae Adams is going to play today, but in a speculative move, I picked up Packers rookie Valdez-Scantling. Mm-hmm. He has been taking first-team reps all week. He is going to be the wide receiver 2 in this game, potentially wide receiver 1 if something does happen to Adams. He's far ahead of the other rookies on the depth chart. Does that mean he's going to get all the action? No, but he's available in pretty much every league. It's kind of a flex play that I'm still waiting to decide on if it's going to be him or Adams in that flex spot. But in DFS, I'm also using Valdez-Scantling, just 3,300 on DraftKings, super cheap, worth a huge dart there.
Right. Yeah, because last week killed me. Again, this show's got me off my game on Sunday mornings. Carson killed me last week. I had him in two fantasy teams and didn't didn't notice the that he was out, and then that cost me. But hey, that's the fun part. I'm learning. I was much more prepared this morning. Homemade chicken and noodles for people who are paying attention to the
noodles today. So what was it? It was brisket week 1.
Yep.
What was last week?
Last week was taco bar.
Okay, taco bar, and now we got homemade chicken and noodles.
Homemade chicken and noodles, corns, peas, mashed potatoes.
Sunday football at Easy. It's not just about the football; it's about the food too.
It is. It definitely is about the food. So we'll have today another big showing with the Bengals being on at 1:00. It messes up. There's a lot of around here. We have a lot of Pittsburgh fans, a lot of Cleveland fans,
a lot of AFC North fans, obviously.
Correct. So what happens is that when the Bengals are live, obviously it bumps some of those off because they're on the same network. So what happens are the other fantasy people in my league that are fans of those teams show up here because they know on the Sunday ticket, Easy's gonna can put their game on and here they bring their own beer, but the food is free and you can't get that at a sports bar. So it makes it kind of fun. The big thing too, also while we're talking about the Green Bay is this is the first week Rodgers hasn't been on any kind of injury list. He just doesn't have anybody to throw to. I'm sitting him in. I have a 2-quarterback league where I have Dalton, Stafford, and Rodgers. Always hate sitting Rodgers. Last time it hurt me that I didn't sit him and sat Dalton. This time I am sitting him. I still think it's not him as much as just who he's got to throw to.
Well, there's that for sure. But honestly, he might not be on an injury report, but he is injured.
Sure.
He is hampered. He has not looked like Aaron Rodgers this season. And I mean, I think Stafford's going to have a good day. You said Stafford, right?
Stafford and Dalton is who I went.
Dalton. I have no issues with Dalton. I mean, I think the Dolphins are an overrated team. I think the Bengals win possibly by double digits today, to be honest with you.
I'm open.
They're one of the picks I like today. I love, obviously, Boyd. I love AJ Green. It'll be interesting to see what Mixon does with now Gio Bernard is out. The moment Gio Bernard goes out, Mixon happens to come back. But they've talked a lot about kind of easing Mixon into the fold this week. And I'm not really sure how they're going to do that, because if they want to, kind of finish this game off in the fourth quarter, they're going to have to run the ball a lot. And I'm not sure they can trust either of their rookies. I think a lot of it
Mark Walton. I did pick him up. I mean, obviously not to play, but I just figured now that, if Nick Mixon comes back and we get hurt today and be out a couple of weeks, I think Walton would be the starter for the next couple.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a nice speculative ad, because if something does happen to Mixon, you have yourself a starting running back. I mean, it's a lot of people got burned in the opposite way when they dropped TJ Yeldon last week because Fournette came back, and then Yeldon was out there on a bunch of waiver wires. And now Yeldon's the starting running back for the next 3 or 4 weeks. If you held on to Yeldon, which you should have anyway, because it's a perfect handcuff,
right,
with the way that Fournette's been off injured this year, then you're loving life. But if you had Yeldon, dropped him, you're kicking yourself right now.
Right. Plus, last week my Bengals gig for DraftKings, I played in all tournaments. And I doubled my money. I mean, the Bengals the Bengals did great. I actually scored like 200 points or 215, something like that. And I remember the days where that would win you a tournament. Now, shit, just barely. I doubled my money. So, it wasn't hateful that what my Bengals did this last week. I do, like I said, we'll get to a couple DFS questions. What other major moves or let's go with any unexpected inactives this morning?
There's not really any unexpected inactives right now that I'm looking at. I mean, again, like last week, Corey Clement and Darren Sproles are out for the Philadelphia Eagles. Of course, Jay Ajayi is the workhorse, but that could open up some Wendell Smallwood potential in that game versus the Vikings, who have just not been able to play defense this year, which is a big shocker, because coming to the year, the Vikings defense was great. So I guess knowing for sure that Sproles and Clement are both out is interesting.
Parker's out, which I think makes Stills,
definitely more interesting.
Good.
Yeah, Dante Pettis for the 49ers is out. Marquise Goodwin is questionable. That could mean a lot for Pierre Garçon owners. If you have Pierre Garçon with Pettis out and Goodwin hobbled could be interesting for the Cowboys. Terrence Williams is out with a foot injury. That could mean Michael Gallup and Cole Beasley see a lot more action there. Will Fuller and Kiki Kute are both questionable in the Houston game. So is Lamar Miller, but all three are expected to play. That's Lamar Miller, the running back, of course. Fuller and Kiki Kute are wide receivers. They all should be in, but check that right before game time if you have any of those players.
And I know you made fun of me last week. I think it was you. Maybe it was Chris when I talked about stashing Foreman. I'm pretty sure they came out this week and said Foreman will definitely be back in week 7. And he's ready to go. I think he's going to quickly become the starter in Houston. So to me, if you have an IR spot and you can pick him up, move in there, that's great. Or if you just, if you got a couple weeks, I think he's going to be the starter in Houston.
You know what? He could be, and it could have been coach talk, but I think I've mentioned it to you on our shows here before that a lot of people within the Houston Texans organization said that Deshaun Watson and Lamar Miller have a very good relationship. They work really well together, but that doesn't mean anything if Lamar Miller continues to not produce, and he's not producing.
Right.
I mean, I never thought of him as an RB1. In real life or in fantasy. He gets drafted sometimes as an RB1, certainly as an RB2. But to me, his value is limited because unless he gets in the end zone, he just doesn't rack up enough yards. He doesn't catch enough passes. He just doesn't do enough.
Right. Early on in drafts, I put him, Lynch, and Hyde in that same category where if you were going, if you're going running back heavy at the beginning of drafts, and obviously those other two have surpassed Miller. At best, Miller, in my opinion, right now is a flex if you have no other running backs or in bye weeks. But, we're, at least Hyde and Lynch, they've more than paid off where you got them in most early drafts.
Lynch has been very good. Hyde had, I believe, touchdowns in the first 3 weeks of the year.
Right.
On my bench, by the way, for all 3 of those weeks.
I could afford him on my bench because he truly, again, those 3 were in some leagues, they were my first running backs, so I took them figuring, well, if I'm going wide receiver heavy, as long as the wide receiver gets me points, those guys hopefully get me those 10, 15 range, depending on your scoring. And really they have other than Miller. Miller, I just can't do anything with on teams I've got him.
No, and you know what? There's never really been a week where I've been like, I need to start Carlos Hyde either. I mean,
well, again, I think it depends on your running back.
Good. I like him. I actually think he's a little underrated, to be honest with you. But when you have 3 running backs in Cleveland, especially with Duke Johnson getting a lot of the pass work, Nick Chubb, they drafted him for a reason. I mean, he finally made his presence felt last week on, I think, 3.
Here in Ohio, everyone's going Chubb happy. And it really was. But what people don't realize, he was in not only was it just 3 carries, he was only in on 3 plays.
Yeah. And it's interesting because obviously Hyde is still the lead back there, but for how much longer? How much is Chubb going to get into that target share? And again, in fantasy, to me, still, even in PPR leagues, it's all about touchdowns. I mean,
that's true.
If you score a touchdown, you have a good week because unless it's your only touch of the entire game, you're having a good week. Because even if you have 35 rushing yards, 2 catches for 17 yards and a touchdown, that's double-digit points.
Right.
The chat, think about how bad that week is without the touchdown.
Right. Because Chubb technically didn't have a good week if it wasn't for a 75-yard run. So Andrea's asking Doug Baldwin or Cameron Meredith. I would go Baldwin. Yeah. I mean, I know he's not 100%. I know their offense isn't clicking, but he's definitely by far the upside. And
the matchup's better for Baldwin, even against a good Rams team, because Seattle will probably be playing from behind. And they'll have to throw the ball. Baldwin's still Russell Wilson's favorite target. We look at Cameron Meredith. He has the skill set, but he's still new to that offense. There is a lot of plays to go to Michael Thomas. Ted Ginn gets enough action. And with Mark Ingram back in the fold now, finally this week, I mean, if the Saints already ran the ball a lot with Kamara, they're going to run the ball, probably even more now with Kamara and Ingram back there. So I think Meredith is one of those very high risk and not really that much of a reward play, whereas Baldwin could make, 10 grabs for 110 yards and maybe a touchdown.
Correct. I agree. So any I think the big active, again, back to there, where I live is the tight end there for the Ravens. And tight ends are obviously there's not a lot of them out there. I've stashed him in a few leagues because I think that he's going to get the ball. I just don't think I'd play him this week. Hayden Hurst, he's a big wide receiver more than a tight end. So I'm kind of excited because that's a team that uses the tight end quite a bit.
I would still stay away from Hurst until we see what his action is like, what his snap count is like, what his target share is like, because you're right. They like to use the tight ends, but they have 3 or 4 of them that they use.
Well, right. But that's my point though. You still have to, I like to stash a week or two. I don't think I can play him yet until he has the big week.
Yes.
And that's what you always worry about. But at the same time, you try to stash someone like that where it didn't cost you any waiver money or any fab money or a waivers pick. If you have the spots, because again, with tight ends being so weak, which it looks like Greg Olson's going to be back as early as next week, and he was dropped in a lot of my leagues. I've been able to pick him up.
That's a great stash there, 100%. Cam Newton, that's the one guy I trust catching balls from Cam Newton when he's healthy.
Yeah, Funches.
So Malpal has a question here in the chat room. Needs help PPR. He needs an RB2 this week. Tevin Coleman or Royce Freeman. Freeman, I believe, is off against the Jets, but he is in a complete share, in my opinion, with Phillip Lindsay. Neither one is a great start, but both are a quality start, more so in the flex. You look at Coleman, now Devontae Freeman's coming back, so that obviously hurts Coleman's value. But that Steelers-Falcons game, and I talked about it yesterday on First and Goal, probably going to be the highest scoring game on the slate today. I would say that Coleman has the higher floor than that of Freeman, and Coleman has a nose for the end zone. So to me, in a high-scoring game, I expect Tevin Coleman to outperform Royce Freeman. I also think that you're going to see a lot of Case Keenum to Emmanuel Sanders and Demaryius Thomas in this football game.
Right. I would go Coleman if that was my team, just because, again, I agree with you. I think Freeman's going to be worked in. You also, and I think Coleman, like you said, they trust him anyway. And then, you run the, there's always that risk of a re-injury where Coleman gets, the whole second half even. I mean, I just think there's more upside there. So that'd be my recommendation. Also, what about the Lions wide receivers? What do you have? I know Tate took off last week and got all the targets, but at the same time, I know Marvin Jones still is the number one wide receiver as far as on the field. And then you have the rookie that's really been involved a lot. Do you play any of them, sit all of them?
Sorry, I missed that because I was answering a question for Andrea in the chat room. The Lions receiver.
The Lions wide receiver.
So, I mean, it's hard to pick one that's going to be the best of the bunch, but I trust all 3 of them. If I own them, I'm starting them. I like Tate the most from a PPR standpoint. I like Galladay the most from a touchdown standpoint. Yet Marvin Jones could end up outperforming both of them. Marvin Jones is dealing with a bit of an injury, though, and I do think that Galladay has taken over that number 2 role in that offense, and he gets a lot of work on the outside. I think the Packers are very beatable on the outside.
Right, but Jones is on the field more than either one of them still. Now, I know this time he's hurt, so we'll see.
Jones is probably the best blocker in
the
game as well of the 3, which would explain why he's in there more often. Tate is really more so of that, PPR guy. He'll have the odd big play. Galladay's that guy that's going to go up there and fight for a ball against anybody. And Marvin Jones is kind of a hybrid of the 2.
Right. And then, I saw you answered the question. The question was defenses, Falcons or Cardinals. You said Cardinals. I also would say Cardinals.
Well, the Steelers are going to score close to 30 points. So the only way the Falcons can do anything for you is if they pick off Big Ben 3 or 4 times, maybe going for a touchdown. Right. I don't think the Cardinals are a good defense, but the 49ers offense is not that good to begin with. And without Jimmy Garoppolo, there's a lot more opportunity for CJ Beathard to come down and force the ball to someone, make some turnovers. I don't like either of those defenses, but if I had to choose one
or the other, right. So that would be the other issue. Always, look what else is out there on your waiver. Sometimes you can pick up something late that you missed.
Honestly, easy. You know what? Honestly, streaming defenses is something I actually do quite often. If I don't take a top 3, 4, 5 defense in a draft, I stream every week. I find the best matchup. And I mean, this week I'm streaming the Titans in one league because they're facing the Bills. I'm streaming the Bengals in one league because I think the Dolphins are overrated. And then in one league, I have the Rams because the Rams are great.
The Rams are great. And you got your, I noticed your Dak Prescott today. What are you expecting out of those Cowboys?
So superstitious. So this Yankees hat,
I saw.
So Friday I was wearing a different hat. They lost, so I threw this one on yesterday. They won, so now I'm wearing that until they lose again. This Prescott jersey I wore last week, if you remember, and the Cowboys won. So I'm riding the hot Cowboys jersey. I'm riding the hot Yankees hat, and only time will tell how long I'll be wearing both of them. But for the Cowboys, it's an interesting game this week between them and the Texans. And I have a number of notes on it, actually, because I did the First and Goal show yesterday and talked about that game in depth. So let me pull those up so I can give everyone.
Yeah, while you're doing that, out in the chat room now, we have Lenny, Andrea, JJ Works, which has been doing great with his new show out there at Lenny Melnick, fantasysports.com. The Real Double A. So we got quite a few people out there. We got a few guests, and based on a few of the guest questions, I'm guessing that's Cha-Cha out there. So we appreciate everybody coming out and listening to us on a Sunday morning. And again, type in your questions. Both of us are getting better at watching. You're better at me, but watching that chat room while you're talking and trying to listen, it's always harder than it seems, but we'll try to get to it. Real Double A PPR flex spot. Lat Murray or Nelson Aguilar. Lat Murray's playing a pretty good defense, but he is going to be the main player there. So I'd be a Lat Murray there because Philadelphia, Nelson Aguilar, now has competition. So that'd be my answer.
Okay, hold on. There's a lot of questions coming in here.
Yeah, I'm trying to keep up.
Dalvin Cook is out. I just go with Latavius Murray. I mean, especially with Alshon Jeffrey back now, I think Jeffrey and Ertz are the main two guys there in Philadelphia. Aguilar could have a good day versus the Vikings defense that's struggling, but Lat Murray's going to get most of the work. Also, Marvin Jones or Cooper Kupp. You got to go with Cooper Kupp while he's this hot right now. Again, it's a very similar situation. Both teams have three very good wide receivers. Yep. But I think Cooper Kupp, the Rams doing a really good job of finding great matchups for Cooper Kupp where he's lined up against a linebacker, right, and he's going to beat that linebacker 9 out of 10 times. And they can start all their those plays. Andrea asks, she has Mahomes, Rodgers, and Rivers. I can play too. This is the first week I would say don't start Patrick Mahomes simply based on the matchup. Do I think the Chiefs can win? Yes. Do I think the Chiefs can put up points? Yes. But Rivers has an incredible matchup. Rodgers has a very solid matchup versus the Lions. Much better than that of Mahomes versus the Jags.
The argument I might have now, I would have said Mahomes' matchup all this week. I think the rain helps him now. That today it's raining there. It's a little sloppy. He's mobile. His wide receivers, his weapons are mobile. I think you're going to see a few of those little, dink off flips where they run for 40 yards and a touchdown maybe. So I think the Rodgers-Mahomes is more of a coin flip than I think you just said, but I agree, but at the same time, I think the rain there helps a little bit because they do so many crazy things on offense that the defense, even as good as they are, that wet field's going to hurt them a little, I think now. Yeah,
but at the same time, the wet field could hurt the offense too.
Never. It never does.
It's a two-way street there, and the wet play could affect the.
Maybe I lost Lou. I don't know. Are you still there, Lou?
I would never recommend starting any quarterback against the Jags unless you're in a one-quarterback league and you don't have a better quarterback. But when you have Rodgers and Rivers, it's not.
I know. The problem still is Rodgers. Like we said earlier in the thing, the issue still with Rodgers is, which is one of my DFS questions here in a minute, is, Ty Montgomery, and a few of those things. And with him being hurt, I just think they're going to try to – and I think they want to keep Stafford and those wide receivers off the field. I think Green Bay is going to hand off more than we've seen.
Yeah, I think this is a big Aaron Jones game.
I agree.
On Aaron Jones this week. I think he's the best of those three running backs. I think Montgomery might actually be used as a wide receiver a little more today. If you remember, he was originally drafted as a wide receiver, played wide receiver his rookie year, moved to running back before Williams and Jones came into the fold for the Packers. So to me, Montgomery going to see some action at wide receiver. Williams will be behind Mr. Jones, and Jones has been making the most of his opportunities so far this year.
Right.
He's cheap in the daily game, and just in general, I think it's Aaron Jones. And JJ Work asked my thoughts on Josh Gordon. I said, well, he played this week already, but he meant next week versus the Chiefs. Start all your offensive player against the Chiefs. All their games are going to be shootouts because they have an explosive offense and not that good of a defense. In fact, I have a DFS lineup today with Blake Bortles in it and Austin Sperry and Jenkins and
But you got 100 lineups. You got 100. That's easy.
I have 8 this week. Sometimes I have 5, sometimes I have 12, whatever. Either way, I have a Bortles, Yeldon, Westbrook, and Sperry and Jenkins lineup because I think that they're going to have to air the ball out because they're going to have to keep up with the Chiefs. And although I did say bench Mahomes, it's more so because instead of 35 or 40 points for the Chiefs, it might be more like 27 or 28 points.
Right. And then obviously Andrea has to put a Boston, Red Sox picture in the chat room. But
it's actually not a Red Sox picture. It's a David Price picture.
I know what it is.
Toronto uniform, Andrea, because the Blue Jays acquired him from the Tigers years ago at the deadline, and he did not pitch that well for them in the playoffs. No surprises there. Asimov, Ridley. I assume you're talking about Calvin Ridley and not Steven Ridley. So Calvin Ridley or Emmanuel Sanders. I'm going to go with Ridley. I'm going in the game stack there with the Falcons and Steelers again. I'm taking the team that I think is going to put up a lot of points. And although there's 2 running backs in Atlanta, there's Hooper, there's Jones, there's Sanu, I think all Falcons are in play today. And it's not that the matchup for Sanders isn't good, but what we've seen from Calvin Ridley the past few weeks, big playability, red zone target, I think he's the better play.
Right. All right. And again, Andrew's still putting pictures out there. So then it makes me miss some of the questions. Cha-Cha says he can't hear, but I don't think that's an issue because it's Cha-Cha. But it wouldn't be it doesn't help me any if I don't ask one DFS question out of my Bengals. I did 2 Bengals lineups today. But a few of the oddball players I went for, I'll just throw the 4. And because all of them are about the same kind of money, and that's Kenyon Drake, Ty Montgomery, Derrick Henry, and Kenny Stills. I've kind of mixed them up, in a couple of things just because I think they'll be less owned. And I think, if one of them takes off, and that's just kind of the way I do it with my 6 Bengals in there.
Can I give you a cheaper option than those guys who could do as well and could save you some money?
Well, sure, but I'm not going to spend the money anywhere because I already spent all my money on my Bengals and everything.
Well, Bengals Smallwood is $3,500 today.
I did see that, and I'm not going to say
flex play than anything. I wouldn't put him in a running back spot. I would only use him in a situation where I want to pay up for a Julio Jones, Keenan Allen, Antonio Brown types.
So out of the 4 I named, who would you put him over? All of them?
No, I think
Stills could have a big day. And obviously, if you're going with the Bengals stack, I had to have a little Miami Dolphins action because if they're going to score a lot, you got to hope Miami's going to get a little bit with Parker out. So I'd have trouble dumping Stills now. Ty Montgomery, I'm just not sure. Obviously, they don't have much action. I've assumed he's going to be in there as running back and a wide receiver.
I'd go with Smallwood over Montgomery. And I mean, the difference now, remember, you're asking me which player I prefer. I prefer Stills, but from a pricing standpoint, I might prefer Smallwood. It's about $2,400 difference. Now for you, it's just you using your Bengals. You're not going to make a change. But for someone else in a situation where they're trying to save money, maybe pay up for a tight end or a defense or a wide receiver one, that's the way to go.
Right. Both of my lineups include obviously all the Bengals. Then I was able to get Julio Jones as the extra wide receiver in both of those. So I kind of went that route. And then, I went with Broncos defense in both just because of the price. And then, like I said, a handful of just, low price players and just mix it up a little bit. We'll see. Maybe I'll put a 3rd Bengals lineup in there and get me some, a little Philadelphia action in there. So, and again,
AJ Work asks who you think the biggest upset of the day is going to be.
I mean, that's always hard because I never look at games like that, being a fantasy person. Yeah. So I don't. I guess in my mind, when I saw it earlier, if the Seahawks beat the Rams, I wouldn't be surprised.
I would be very surprised.
Okay, but I'm just saying it's at home. I don't know. It's just and that's the point. He's asking, the biggest upset. To me, that would be a big upset, and I just be curious. Again, Seahawks have no defense, but they are at home, so. And the Rams, every team every year has
definitely be the biggest upset, 100%. But I feel like he's asking more of a question of what is actually going to be the biggest upset, not what could be. Because I think the Seahawks beating the Rams would definitely be the biggest. I think
it's a pretty fair week. I don't think Cowboys, Texans, either one could win. Vikings, Eagles. To me, this week, if anything, it's a pretty fair slate. Maybe the Redskins beating the Saints. But I don't think that would be that big of an upset.
That would be a big upset to me as well. It could happen. If I had to pick one, and it's technically an upset just because they're
don't say Dolphins. I'll be pissed.
No,
they're
the road dog
right now.
They are the road dog. It's the Falcons. Falcons are Steelers are favored by 3.5 in that game. It's in Pittsburgh. To me, it's not an upset because I think the Falcons are just as good, if not better, than Pittsburgh.
Yeah, that's my point. I don't look at that as
technically
I'm rooting for Pittsburgh to lose.
Yeah, but of course you are. But technically they are the underdog, so it would count. Mike Williams or Quincy Enunwa. Mike Williams, I think, Andrea. Quincy Enunwa is good, but Darno is a rookie. The Broncos have a decent defense, even though I think the game's in New York. There should be a lot of scoring in that Chargers and Raiders game. Mike Williams, outside of last week, got a lot of work in this offense so far. I think he's at the better start.
Who are you picking in the Panthers-Giants? To me, that's kind of a coin flip also.
Panthers.
The
Giants offense hasn't shown me enough. And the Panthers have a good defense, especially at home, and they're rested coming off the bye.
I need Odell Beckham to start doing something. Is this
a lot of people need Odell Beckham to start doing something?
I agree. He was my late first round pick in a couple of leagues. And obviously Thomas was the person to take in that spot instead of Odell Beckham so far, obviously. So we'll see what happens this week. Any other late news? I know you're better at paying attention while we're doing the podcast. Any other late inactives or actives that we would have missed at the beginning of the show before we get ready to go?
No, not really. We kind of hit on all of those already.
And I think weather-wise, I think it's just Kansas City. I think there's not much going on anywhere else. And that's just rain.
Yeah, let's see. Julio Jones, big day today. Yeah, he should have a massive day. The whole Falcons offense.
Andrew's asking Devontae Adams is playing. That is correct, but
yes,
I'm not looking to play him. He's not at 100%.
He is a player. He's a very good player. He's the Packers' #1 wide receiver, whether they have all their weapons or not, but he is banged up. But if he's playing, I expect him to be targeted heavily. I expect him to get a lot of red zone looks as well.
All right. One last question. Raiders wide receivers. What's going to happen there today?
The only one I would even take a shot on would be Amari Cooper, but he's been very inconsistent this year. He's had 2 incredible weeks and 2 awful weeks.
I guess
Jordy Nelson's touchdown dependent. Jared Cook's the guy that I like the best. I know he's a tight end, but as a pass catcher, he's been the most consistent player 100% for the Raiders on offense outside of Derek Carr and Marshawn.
Right. All right. Okay. Well, we got a half hour before game time. Unless there's any important questions out there in the chat room or anything like that. Lou, where can people find you?
At Landers Talks on Twitter, but more importantly, come to the Lenny Malnick FantasySports.com chat room every single day, Monday through Sunday. There are shows every single day, multiple shows on most days. George Kittle or Jimmy Graham, George Kittle. Jimmy Graham is also banged up. The 49ers offense is kind of in a they're kind of stuck right now because
starting Breida over Ingram. That was a question. Just Asimov said he's going to start Breida over Ingram. What do you think about Ingram today?
I would take a wait and see approach with Ingram, personally. Okay. But Andrea, I would say that George Kittle is the better play this week because CJ Beathard or Bethard, if you want to call him that, is going to be looking in his direction quite a bit. And with regards to Jimmy Graham, he is injured, and Jimmy Graham's been kind of underwhelming so far this year, my opinion, Easy.
I agree. But today, obviously, with less wide receivers, I'll be curious what happens there. JJ Work wants to know if Aaron Rodgers' leg could fall off. I think it's a possibility, but I think Green Bay could trade that. And probably there's a few teams that Aaron Rodgers' leg would be a better quarterback option. But, that we'll just see. Lou, I appreciate you coming on. This is fun because, like I said, I don't have to do a whole lot of research. I know you know a lot more, so I just get asked the good questions. Let's get ready. You got 9 TVs behind you back there, ready to watch a bunch of football. Same thing. Lenny Melnick, fantasysports.com. Come to the chat room, register, have fun. The chat room, it's not one of those where you have to feel that you do not fit. You don't have to be. I am proof that you don't have to be an expert to be in there and start chatting. A couple years ago, I was very timid about, I don't bring anything to this. And now I'm in there, obviously, talking stuff I don't know about and having a blast. So I'd recommend anybody, to come there, log in, and enjoy the chat room. So everybody have a good Sunday. Good luck with all your picks, and I hope we helped at least one person other than Cha-Cha. So we'll see you all, like I said, Monday morning, 9 o'clock. See you then.
Take care, all.
Bye, guys.
This has been Just a Fantasy Fan podcast. And to keep your fantasies going, follow us at justafantasyfan.com. Say good night. Good night.